Okay, let's talk. So, welcome to the second of the 4 talks in the Android session, Android track at Google Developer Day Brazil. My name is Tim Bray. I'm an Android advocate in the Android group at Google, and you'll be happy to hear that the next talk in the track is being given by somebody else. So today we're going to talk about how to make applications that will make users happy. Now, how many of you are Android developers? Oh, more than the last session. Okay, excellent. Good. So today I'm here to be unfriendly. I'm going to lecture you and tell you to behave better. Okay, so I apologize in advance. Because one of the main criticisms that we get about Android being compared to the competition, and I don't want to mention Apple's name, but is that the Android apps are not as beautiful as their apps, and they're right. So fix that, okay? So here's the story that we want to see. We want to have a better UI. People are happier. We want people to perceive quality. We want to get better ratings. You want to get better rankings. You want to get more installs. You want to get more money. You know where money comes from? Money comes from quality. One thing we've learned is that even if an app does something that's incredibly useful and incredibly difficult, if it's ugly or confusing or slow, people will not use it. They just won't. Now, in the world of enterprise software, where your boss says, write a program to do this, and then you write the program, and he goes and says, you must use his program, then they will use his program. I'm sorry, boys and girls, it's not like that anymore. Software that goes in somebody's pocket is a very personal statement. And you're talking to consumers, you have no way to force them to use the software. You have to make them want to use the software. Of course, it's possible that some of you may be writing Android applications for your boss in big companies where users will be required to use them, so you can leave now. No? Okay. So you have to take your app and throw it out into the deep waters of the Android market, and it has to find love based on appeal. And we see so much of this, Somebody launches an application and it crashes and they give it 1 star and they uninstall it and they put a nasty comment on the Android market and they blog about it and they tweet about it. And I tell you, if you publish an app that's not good, it's really, really hard to recover, okay? On the other hand, 5-star apps, we're starting to see some huge success stories in terms of business success. People are starting to make some real money. People are starting to do some wonderful things with open source. So the rest of the talk today, I'm going to talk about our advice for how you can avoid the left-hand side and get on the right-hand side of this picture. But this requires some mental modeling. We need to think before we start about, in the most general way, what makes people happy. Well, when somebody goes and gets your app, they have some expectations. They say, okay, here's an app to play dominoes, or to find restaurants, or to take my temperature, or to measure a running distance, or something like that. So they will have an expectation in their mind of what your app does. And also, even though this is not fair, they will also have an expectation in their mind of how difficult it will be to use and, how it should work. And basically, the measurement of quality in the user's mind is expectation versus reality. If the expectation is low, it's easy to have high quality. If the expectation is high, it's very, very difficult. So really the absolute measure of quality seems to be the difference between the expectation and the actual experience. So that's really the right way to think about it. You have to try terribly, terribly, terribly hard to figure out what it is that users expect and need, and to do better than that. So how are you going to do that? It's really hard to do that. So very few people are smart enough to guess accurately what it is that people want from an application. So the Google solution for this is the public beta. Right? The idea is get the code out in front of users as soon as you possibly can, and don't try and guess what they want. Ask them what they want. Show them the software, and if you want to write software to, I don't know, to help you train for a long distance run or something like that. You have your own ideas, but you can't guess what people are going to want. You have to put it in their hands and find out. Now, we actually think you should be even braver than that and start to gather the experience even before it seems reasonable. Now, I have some advice. When you're doing the public alpha, don't put it in the Android market, right? Because any alpha is going to get some bad reviews, and the bad reviews don't go away. Now, fortunately, unlike some other operating systems, and I don't want to mention Apple's name, you don't have to get an app from the market. You can get an Android app from a website. You can send it an email. You can, put it on a USB key. You can send So as soon as you have something that works at all, you really need to give it to a few of your friends and family and your mom and your girlfriend and your boyfriend and see what they think of it, because you'll start to get some real honest user reactions that will be incredibly valuable to you. And then one of the other advantages of Android Market is that the release process is instant. So most of the successful Android apps that I see have a habit of releasing regularly, once per month, sometimes even once per week. For example, there are many, many Twitter apps out there. The one that I use is called Twidroid. I'm very fond of it. And Twidroid releases several times a month, absolutely regularly. And it just gets better and better and better and better, because they listen to what people are saying, and they adopt a policy of continuous improvement. Now, somehow you have to find a way for people to tell you what they think. The Android market comments, there's too many of them, they're hard to track. So there are many websites like Get Satisfaction, and we have one of our own that you can go to, places for people who can leave a discussion forum and leave their comments and give feedback. And you should definitely do that. There's a problem with doing that, which is that when people give feedback about applications, unfortunately, they lie. They said, I tried this and it didn't work. Well, actually, if you look what they really did, that wasn't what they said they did. Or they said, this didn't work, or that didn't work, or that's fast, or that's slow, and it's very hard to replicate. So there's this thing you can do called analytics. Analytics for Android. And it'll give you reports like this, showing you all the different activities and services and screens in your application, and exactly how often they were visited, and what people did, and what paths people took through the application. And it's absolutely invaluable. If you're serious about your application, this will tell not what your users said they did, but exactly what your users really did. And it's actually pretty easy to do this. So, one of the most common things is people report a bug. Now, every serious application has some settings that people can change. And if you have more than 3 settings, you have a very large number of possible combinations, and it's hard to figure out what could have gone wrong. Well, with analytics, you can find out what the settings were. You can find out all about errors and exceptions and so on. And if you look at the code, there's really not much to it. Okay. So maybe one of the single most important things is you got to pay attention to your users, and you got to measure your users. Another thing is that bugs are unacceptable. In an enterprise app where you've got people at desktops, if it crashes sometimes, they just restart it. And also, as we at Google know very well, in many cases when you have a bug in a web application, the user never even notices. I mean, sometimes you do a Google search and it doesn't come back, and you think, oh, stupid web, and you refresh, there it is. Well, what happened was there was a bug on the first search, and you never noticed. So you really got to fight bugs. And once again, one of the nice things about the Android market is that when you find a bug, you can get it out to all your users very, very, very quickly. So for those of you who are not doing test-driven development, please start doing test-driven development. This is the idea that came out of the agile software movement, that when you write a new routine, you should write the tests first and then write the code until it passes the tests, and then stop. And test-driven development does enable you to produce high-quality software, but even more important, if you do test-driven development, it gives you the courage to do big refactorings. To when you see some part of your code that's running badly, you can tear it apart and put it back together. And as long as you have a good test suite that keeps running, you have courage, and you know that you can be brave and rebuild your software as much as it needs. So test-driven development is really, really important. Now, unfortunately, on Android, it's much more difficult to do test-driven development than it is with web applications. It requires a little bit of extra work, but it's worth the work. If you're going to be living with and maintaining your app into the future, you really, really, really need a good test suite so that you can sleep at night. Most people know about this, but some don't. Inside the Android SDK, there's a thing called the monkey. It's a testing monkey, and what it does is it simulates a bunch of random user interface actions, touching the screen everywhere, swiping it, pressing all the buttons, all the things that a user can possibly do. And you should never, never release an app unless you have exposed it to the monkey first. It is very, very effective at finding stupid bugs that you would never think of because you would never do those things, but lots of users will do those things. You should have a public bug tracker, a place can register bugs. One of my favorite open source software projects has a bug tracker, and you register bugs there. And then whenever they release a new release of the software, they send a personal email to everybody who reported a bug saying, oh, by the way, in release 6.1.8, we fixed this bug that you reported last April 14th. And you know, that's a really nice thing to do. Okay, so you've got to be super aggressive about bugs. The next thing you have to worry about is speed. If an application not responding is a horrible, horrible thing you should never allow to happen. People are incredibly sensitive to the performance of mobile applications. And we're doing the last talk in the Android track this afternoon is about how to make your Android applications responsive and fast. It's super important. You just absolutely have to worry about it. So I'm not going to talk too much more about that. Let's move on. So assuming it doesn't crash, and assuming it does more or less what people want, and assuming it's reasonably fast, the next thing you have to worry about is this very abstract notion called usability. And it's incredibly hard to define, to design ordinary things in a way that they're usable. And this, by the way, is a totally wonderful book. It's been revised a few times. It's quite old, but it's a wonderful book, and it talks about how to make things that are actually usable in a day-to-day sense. You know, the slogan is that in any piece of product, software product included, easy things should be easy, and hard things should be possible. And for the basic everyday operations on a mobile phone, which somebody is using with one hand while they're holding on to the pole in a bus, going around corners, being crowded by strangers, the basic things that your application does have to be 1 or 2 clicks. Anything more is unacceptable. So this is the usability stuff. There are all sorts of methodologies and tools and so on for increasing usability, but I think that, unfortunately, there is some magic in here. You know, usability is one of the things that separates great developers from not so great developers. And it's really about talent. And, you know, if there's an error that is possible, somebody will absolutely make it. Because even, you know, I have this very, very small, simple Android app in the market, which is for transferring your phone log from an old phone to a new phone. The simplest thing imaginable. It's got over 1,000 downloads. I mean, it's crazy. The Android market is getting so big. The Android community is getting so big. It's very, very easy to get 10,000 downloads. If you get 10,000 users, some of them will be crazy. They will do all sorts of stupid things. They will make errors that you can't possibly imagine. Okay? So what do you do about that? The right answer is to try to make the errors impossible. Okay? Just set it up so some people can't get into a fix. Now, there are also some very simple, straightforward techniques you can do to improve usability. And people are used to seeing lists of things, and they know how to click on them. You know, they know what the controls on a music player should look like. They know what a back button should look like. They know what a search icon should look like. They know what a menu should look like. Don't invent new stuff, okay? When there are existing patterns that people are well trained to do, just use them, okay? Also, please bear in mind that a lot of Android phones are very small devices, and a lot of people like me have big, fat, clumsy fingers. So please, no small buttons. Big buttons, big targets, things that are easy to hit. Also, I don't know how old you are, but you're all going to be 1 year older in 1 year, and I guarantee that none of you have eyes that are getting better. So, and you know, I'm over 50, and my eyes are not what they once were. And please, no teeny tiny texts. You know, I have to wear reading glasses to read anything that's small, and I love Android apps that have, you know, the important stuff in big letters so that I don't have to put on my reading glasses to see it. Big fonts. And finally, in usability, remember those analytics that I was talking about? The analytics are incredibly important for usability because they show the patterns that people are taking through your code. Now, in any application is going to be subject to an 80-20 rule, which means there's probably 20% of the application where people spend 80% of their time. And in that 20%, you really have to work hard so that everything is 1 or 2 clicks at most. And here's another way to think about it. If to use your app, if people have to read a bunch of complex instructions, you are doing it wrong. Okay? It's worse than that. Okay? I'm serious. People are used to picking up very complex computer games. My son, you know, this little boy this big, he goes into a complex computer game, and it always comes with a book of instructions. I give him the instructions. Ah, Dad, I don't need that. Go away, you know. He just starts playing, and he figures it out. And we have trained people that they should not need training. Okay? And every time you add 1 minute of instruction that's required to use your app, you've lost 50% of your audience. I'm not exaggerating. Sometimes you have to do a little bit. Even I've seen some popular games where you need that. But you know, any instruction is a bug. You know, instructions are a bug. So let's assume you do useful stuff. You don't have bugs. You're fast. You're usable. What else do you need to be? You need to be beautiful. Okay? Your application has to be beautiful. And what is beauty? Well, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, we say in English. And the eyes are very sharp. I mentioned that
Para montar a infraestrutura
in the
para uma
area of Twitter
plataforma
in
nossa,
particular, there
ao
are a
longo da
lot of
empresa,
Twitter clients. And I actually am interested in that area, so I watch that area quite closely. And here's the secret. Most of the Twitter clients are about the same. They do about the same things. And most of them are actually pretty good. And what people talk about when they talk about it is how they look. You know, oh, this looks great. This looks great. People respond very, very, very strongly to aesthetic beauty. So how do you make your application beautiful? Well, it's easy. First of all, you have good typography, which means that you have kerning, which is how close the letters are to each other. You pick a good font that's appropriate for the application. You do the justification, justified left, justified right, justified center, both sides. You pick the right font weight, and you pick the font weights so they contrast with the other font weights, and you worry about the leading, which is how close the lines of text are to each other. And then you talk about the color, and you worry about the color transparency, which is the alpha channel, and you worry about color spaces. Do you want sRGB or Adobe color space? And do you need a palette of a small number of strongly related colors, and then you need to worry about the contrast level, particularly as it applies to different kinds of screens. And then once you've solved that, you have to worry about the layout. You know, should it be landscape or portrait? And one of the most important aspects of design is where you leave empty space on the screen. People need empty space for their eyes to focus on the important things. And you know, you need to worry about whether it's for a handset or a tablet. And then, you know, any application that's interesting is going to have some motion. So you have to worry about animations and graceful transitions. And when somebody touches, what visible indication do you give them that's touched? So, do you know about all that stuff? I don't see a lot of hands going up. I have to say, most computer programmers are idiots when it comes to this stuff. It isn't easy. You need a lot of talent. You have to go to school. You have to practice. You have to be good at this stuff to do it. There's only one answer. Hire a professional. Okay? Would you hire a painter to write your code in your application? Well, then why are you doing the design, right? So, are there any professional designers in the crowd today? Stand up, please. Stand up. Come on, hire those people, okay? You need them. I'm serious. Let me give you an example. One of the guys in my group at Android is a guy named Rado Meyer. And he wrote the best book on Android, by the way. And he wrote an application that's quite popular to track earthquakes everywhere in the world. Okay? And it turns out there's a lot of people who are really, really interested in earthquakes. And they've downloaded a huge number of copies. And Rado is a really good programmer. And so this was his application. And he wrote it. And then he got the idea of talking to a designer. And the designer he talked to is another guy in our group called Roman Nurek, who's a pretty good designer. And then it looked like that. That. How many of those ideas would you have thought of? Okay. Designers, it's difficult sometimes because designers and software creators tend to have different values, different worldviews, different ways of thinking about things. Also, they dress differently from us, you know. They spend a lot of money on clothes and they still wear black all the time. I don't know, I can't figure it out. But, you know, we need these people. One of the main things that will make the difference between having a successful application and a not-so-successful application is whether you have a good design pro working on it. Okay, so you've all agreed for your next app you're going to go get a designer, right? So you're fast, you're bug-free, you're usable, you're beautiful. What else is important? Well, you need to look like an Android app. We see too many cases where people go and say, oh, I'll just port my Java ME app over. Or even worse, I'll just go port my Windows app over and put it on Android. And this never, ever gets a good result. Well, sorry, it does with games sometimes. Because, you know, once you're into the game, then, you know, the game is just what the pictures are on the screen. But even for games, the things like, you know, the instructions menu, the high scores, the stuff like that, we see these people porting over buttons and menus and things from other systems, and it always looks wrong. The Android applications tend to have a strong look. They have a lot of things in common. This is incredibly valuable for the users because they just know how to use things. Things like the back button. The back button is one of the best things about Android. Don't steal it for your application. You know, don't go and use it for something else. If you have a list in your application, please don't code up your own list. The Android framework includes 8 kinds of lists. They all work. They're good. Please use them. Don't invent your own. Please do not invent your own menu system. Okay? Android has a very good menu system built in. It comes more or less for free when you press the menu button. If you don't look like an Android app, people will notice this, and they won't be able to say clearly why they don't like it. They won't say, oh, it doesn't look like Android. They'll just say, oh, it looks weird. I don't like it. So be a good citizen of the Android ecosystem. Okay, so those, I think, are the essential characteristics of a highly successful quality user interface. I'm going to give you some things, some general principles that we believe in, that these applications should have. So the first thing we believe in is clarity over simplicity. There is a gentleman named Edward Tufte who's written several books about the display of information. And the big lesson that he taught us, and he's got lots of studies that prove this, people say they want simplicity, but that's not true. People want information. People want a lot of information, but they want it displayed in a totally clear way so that it's easy to understand. Consider, you know, this view of this is the app that's running on Android when you put it in the dock and it's sitting there on your desk or beside your bed. And there's actually quite a lot of information in there. It tells you when the alarm's going to go off. It tells you the current time. There's a control to dim the screen. You've got the current weather, where you are, how the battery's charging, branches to music and to alarm clock and things like that. But it's not crowded. They got a good designer on there. They achieved clarity. So do not starve your users of information. You have to go to a lot of work to crowd it in. Now, another principle is that Chrome is bad. What is Chrome? Chrome is all the stuff. Oh, geez, I should use a different word because Chrome means something else at Google, doesn't it? Anyhow, so when browser people talk, when they say Chrome, they're talking about the stuff around the browser, the toolbars and the switches and the sliders and the buttons and the decorations. And on desktop applications, because we have a lot of room, we have the temptation to put a lot of Chrome around our stuff. And you just can't do that on a phone. So this is one of my favorite applications. This is an application called TripIt, which I really recommend. And it's a travel application. And the great thing about it is you don't have to tell it. What happens is when you book a trip, the travel agency or the airline sends you an email. You send the email to TripIt, and it automatically creates your schedule for you. It's really brilliant. And so look at this. I mean, they've packed an incredible amount of information onto this screen without losing clarity, and because they just got rid of all the stuff that wasn't totally essential. So if you get rid of the non-essentials, you win. Another thing that we believe strongly is that it's really a mistake to store any important information permanently on the phone. Okay? I think we also believe that it's a real mistake to store important information on a personal computer. Telephones can fall into the toilet. Telephones can be stolen. Computers are heavy. Often, you don't have your computer with you. We think it's completely wrong that to put information onto a phone, you should have to plug it into a computer. I mean, suppose the computer isn't here. Suppose the computer is stolen. Suppose the computer crashed. For anything that matters, it should really live in the cloud, which means it's available anywhere and it can't fall in the toilet. So this is a screenshot of Dropbox. Lots of people know about Dropbox. If you don't know about Dropbox, you should get it. It's just one of the world's great applications. It's just a network disk drive, nothing fancy about it, but it's got a really nice client for Mac and Windows, and I don't know if Linux, but it's got a nice Android client. It's got Linux, yes. It's got a nice Linux client. It's got a great iPhone client. Basically, it works from anywhere. You just put stuff on it, and then it's there for anybody, and it's really easy to share. So get anything that matters off your fragile, insecure local computers. So, and Google clearly has bet on this, and we're going to be doing some things in music and so on that follow this same principle. Here's another principle that's more subtle, which is that people hate being warned. Okay, they don't like a dialogue coming up and saying, "Oh, are you sure?" So a better principle is to never do that. So if you look at Gmail, for example, this is the Android Gmail app. If you delete some mails, it doesn't come up and say, "Oh, are you sure? Did you really want to delete those mails?" It says, "Okay. Oh, and by the way, you can undo." So an undo is better than a warning. And in fact, particularly if you're using the cloud as backup for your operations, you should really be able to have almost infinite undo in any application. Really, people should be able to work for an hour and then say, "Oh, I didn't really mean that." Make it all go away. And the more undo you have, the better. The fewer warnings you have, the better. Don't get in people's way. When somebody wants to delete a mail, they want to delete a mail. They don't want to see a dialogue. So that's good. One thing that's coming at us very, very fast is multiple screen sizes. So here we have some small Android phone, a Nexus 1, a Samsung Galaxy Tab, and a Google TV. This is great news. Anybody who says that one size is the right size for everybody is just crazy. That's arrogant. Some people carry phones in their pockets. Some people carry phones in their purses. Some people carry phones in their briefcase. Some people want to run Android on their TV. All those things are just fine. So it's a good thing, and whether you like it or not, it's coming. There are going to be a huge number of different sizes of devices coming at us, and you as the developer have to do a good job with that. Okay? Now, the Android Toolkit is full of facilities to help you with this stuff, so that you can provide alternate application layouts for different sizes and shapes and screen densities and things like that. And start getting ready for that now, because it's coming at you very, very quickly. And from your point of view as a developer, this is basically a good thing, because it means that there are more devices to run your apps on. Very closely related to that, please don't lock. You see, Android allows you to lock your application into running only landscape or only portrait mode. Don't do that. That's a really, really bad idea. Maybe it's okay for a game, but not for anything else. Don't tell people how they can hold their phones. This subject is so important in the last 2 slides that we're going to have a whole session on it. The next session after the break is going to be on how to make sure your Android app will run on lots of different kinds of devices. And it's not going to be by me. Another thing, you're going to laugh, but I mean this. Icons are really important. Okay? When somebody picks up their Android phone and looks at it, what do they see? They see a bunch of icons. If yours is the ugly one, that's no good. So we've recently published a new set of guidelines that say, how icons should look. A bunch of rules about how the lighting should be, what the shape should be like, what the color should be. Please, go read those. And we're starting to get some good tools out there to help you develop icons. So focus on your icons. They really matter. When people interact, it's absolutely wrong. When people touch the screen, something should happen. They should see that they've touched the screen. That means that for most buttons that are in your applications, you need to have them in 4 forms. Okay? Another thing that we believe is that your application should cooperate with other applications. So if you hit a URL, don't try and be the web browser, call the web browser. If they want to send mail, don't send mail, just give control to the mail program. Android is carefully designed so that the user experience is presented as a combination of a lot of different applications working together. Here's a beautiful example. 2 applications whose names I forget. One of them is OpenTable, but I'm not sure which one. Anyhow, one is a thing for finding and reviewing restaurants, and the other is an application for booking tables, for making reservations at restaurants. And so they got together and they agreed on an intent. Android has intents. And so the application that finds restaurants, when you say, oh, we'll try and book a table, and it gives control to the restaurant booking application. Isn't that great? Each of them is focusing on the things that they do really well. Finally, we believe that some things are sacred. Don't fool around with them. These are the things that are sacred. So first of all, the status bar. We see a few applications that take over the status bar and make it go away because I want the whole screen to be red and it's gray. That's really a totally evil thing to do, and you should never do that. People really, really care how much battery they have left. People really, really care if they're getting a mobile signal or not. They really, really care if they've had emails arrive and they're in there. And if you take the status bar over, you are taking that away, and I personally will uninstall an app. If an app takes away the status bar, I'm done with it. Games, once again, are allowed to do this, and that's why you miss emails and your wife's phone calls and all sorts of things when you're playing games, but that's life anyhow. The other thing that's sacred is the back button. Everybody in the world has been using browsers for anybody under 30 has been using browsers for as long as they could sit up. And we have trained the entire population of the world that wherever you've been, you can get back there. Just press the back button. So please be careful when your application is built of a bunch of activities. Think about where should the back button take you. Sometimes you've got a particular error condition and you don't want to go back to the previous screen. When they hit back, you want to go to the front screen or something like that. Okay, so you need to think a lot about where should the back button take people. And if people hit the back button and they're surprised, you've really failed as a developer. The menu button. Once again, the menu button acts the same on all Android apps, and it's really important because the menu button is very powerful because it allows you to put the 20% of controls that people use all the time on the screen and not try and squeeze in the minor controls, because everybody who uses Android for more than about a day learns that, oh, I want to do something, I don't see how to do that, well, I'll hit the menu button, right? And they expect to find it there. So don't fight that. Go with it. And there are a few applications where you hit the menu bar and nothing happens. And that makes me feel something's deeply wrong, and the application must be broken or something like that. At least it should say, oh, this is version 1.5 of the application or something. I don't know. And then finally, the search button. Speaking as a representative of Google, I think I can say that we've proved that there are many different navigation schemes through information, but by far the best is to open a search window, type in a few characters, and press enter and let the system find it. So I was reviewing a new application the other day. It was a newspaper reading application, and it has hundreds of newspapers in it from hundreds of countries. And I had to scroll through this huge list of all the countries in the world. And then I went to, I think, UK, Britain, and they had 300 newspapers from Britain. And I had to scroll through this huge list of newspapers. Well, I just wanted to see if they had The Guardian. This is crazy. Just search, Guardian, find it, right? So basically, the majority of screens in your application should have a search button. Okay, and I'm going to talk about a few tools. I'm almost finished here, but I'm going to talk about a few tools and leave time for a little bit of questions at the end. This is stuff that we're going to be talking about in the next talk, but the amount of work that it takes to support multiple different screen sizes and densities and orientations is not that high. Learn how to use this stuff. Okay. There's an incredible number of possible combinations of screen sizes and densities and orientations, and you don't have to fill them all in because the Android framework is actually pretty good at scaling things to fit the sizes and densities available. But the more you fill in, really, the better. Another thing that you should learn how to use is 9-patch graphics. I don't know, a lot of people don't even know about this stuff, but it's really valuable. This is just a little PNG file, and the system will stretch the last row of pixels, the border pixels, all the way across. So this is absolutely the best way to do a fancy border or to fill in odd places in your application. Learn about 9-patches. They're a really great way to make your applications look great. And if you're going to have buttons on your thing, on your screen that people push, there's this thing that not enough people use called a selector. So you put a button in there, and then as people press it, it will automatically switch in different renditions of your buttons. And the difference it makes when buttons change color as you touch them, it just makes the whole thing more enveloping, more pleasant, more friendly. So I'm about finished, but I want to show you a graph. One of the good things that can happen if you have a good app is that it can be featured in the Android market. Okay? So when you go to Android market on your phone, you see a list of featured applications. And the process by which an application gets featured is a combination of an algorithm and some human judgment. Okay? And one of the things that goes into the human judgment is usability, beauty, speed, the kind of things I've been talking about here today. You'd think that there are thousands of great apps out there, wanting to be featured. We actually have to work pretty hard to find the apps to be featured. So if you've got an app that's good and stands out from the crowd and is beautiful and fast and usable, you have a pretty good chance of getting featured. When an app gets featured in Android market, the number of downloads goes up by a factor of from 6 times to about 200 times. So this is an app, just a typical app. In fact, it's the earthquake app that Radar wrote. So that was his number of total downloads, and he was featured there for a couple of weeks, and look what happened. Okay? So that's the reward. But if your app is slow, it won't be featured. If your app is ugly, it won't be featured. If your app crashes, it won't be featured. If your app doesn't have good usability, it won't be featured. And not only will it not be featured, it will not succeed. It's really, really easy to write an Android app. Writing a beautiful, fast, useful Android app is more difficult. It's a real test of your talent, and the job isn't finished until you've hit all the things that I've been talking about here today. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you kindly. Okay, thank you very much. Time for coffee.